We're live. All right, good morning and welcome to the House Environment Committee. This morning, we are taking up H70, an act relating to the inclusion of the use value appraisal land and conserved land inventory. And our first witness is William Sargent.
Good morning. Before I get started, I'll just let you know that I'm here on behalf of the Vermont Forest Products Association. They asked me a couple days ago to come up. As members of this committee, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to testify in front of you. I consider it both an honor and a real opportunity to present my views on this legislation and more specifically, how I believe this ties to what has already happened in Bennington County over my 50-plus year career as a forester. Public land ownership, the 30 by 30 and the 50 by 50 legislation, and other similar proposed legislation that would create more wildlands already have had or will have a direct impact on the forest products industry. Bennington County is, I believe, a bellwether for the rest of the state on the impact of public lands to the working forest landscape in Vermont. I feel that it's of the utmost importance that current use land be added to the definition of conserved and protected lands statewide. To quickly summarize, I'm a native Vermonter, originally from Worcester, Vermont, right up the street, and I lived in Shaftesbury since 1977. I'm a 74 graduate of the University of Vermont School of Natural Resources. And as of this May, I will have made my living for 52 years working as a forester and wildlife manager in Vermont. This includes 10 years as a deputy game warden for the Vermont Fish and Game Department. I couldn't have asked for a more intensely rewarding outdoor career. Most recently, I published a book about my career, 50 Years of Dirt Forester, always outside and never behind a desk. I've enjoyed traveling and speaking to my fellow Vermonters about my book and advocating for forestry and wildlife issues. Now I'll get started.
And actually, it would be great if everyone could limit to about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Get to everyone on the agenda in an hour. So thank you.
Past summer, I was speaking about my book at the Vermont Veterans Home in Bennington. An old friend and business acquaintance by the name of Don Lewis, who was a former owner of a Bennington County sawmill and was a resident of the home, visited me afterwards. He said my presentation and talk about change over my career had gotten him thinking. He suggested I take a closer look at the reasons for the disappearance of sawmills with a focus on Bennington County. He suggested there might be another big story there. I knew these things to be facts. Within the 50 years since I've moved to Bennington County, 10 major sawmills had gone out of business. Along with the 10 sawmills, 3 major furniture manufacturers had gone out of business. This doesn't include the other mills scattered along the New York and Massachusetts line. The economic loss was huge, with a loss of over 500 jobs just in Vermont that did not even include loggers and truckers. What caused the loss of the mills and the manufacturers? Anybody want to guess how many mills are left in Bennington County today? 0. So do you like statistics? Not me, but I'm going to throw a whole bunch at you. Bennington County sawmill suffered more than any other county in Vermont from the very things that contributed to the beauty around us today. Consumers in the area now pay for it every time they go to their lumber yard, where the material comes from the other side of the globe or from Canada. I would offer that the U.S. Forest Service land purchases probably contributed more to the demise of sawmills within Bennington County than any other factor. This statement is not without controversy. Hear me out and I'll keep digging into it. I was going to read you a whole bunch of statistics. I'll skip over them. I'll just go on to say that Bennington County is now made up of 42% U.S. Forest Service lands, the largest percentage in the state of Vermont. Bennington County also has almost half of the wilderness area already in Vermont. All this land was purchased, or most of this land was purchased within my 50-year career as a forester. And I won't bore you with all the statistics.
You can submit your written testimony.
Yes, absolutely.
Great.
Yeah. Early in my career, the Forest Service harvested large, steady volumes of timber on the land within the county. Previous to U.S. Forest Service ownership, these private lands have produced large volumes of timber for many years. Both sawmills, furniture manufacturers, and loggers depended on that log flow. By the early 1980s, changes in how timber sales were appealed became law. Our industry was changed overnight by decisions made at the ballot box. This change was predictable. The easiest way to cripple an industry is cut off their raw material. Volumes being harvested crashed. U.S. Forest Service staffing was cut back substantially. Mills that depended on that volume had to look to private ownership for their wood supply. But that land base had also been eroded and fragmented. The Hale Company in Arlington, Vermont, Reedsboro Chair Factory, and Cushman Furniture in North Bennington, Vermont were big. They had to find different places to purchase their material, all further away. Costs for the raw materials rapidly escalated. Was this the only reason for the loss of the mills? No. I call their demise a death by 1,000 pinpricks. Every mill had its own story, but the one constant was the increase in raw material costs. I'll spend a lot of time in a second book writing about the demise and consequences of the disappearance. Bennington County is already shot by the acreages in the 30 by 30 legislation and is nearly approaching the 50 by 50 acreages. There have been economic consequences of public land creation in Bennington County that nobody anticipated. Additionally, my research has shown me that there have been consequences even to the wildlife that live on these public lands by the timber sale cutbacks. One thing I've heard often was that wildlife thrives on disturbance. It's the exact opposite of what some folks would like us to believe. As my retiring fourth grade teacher's wife says, you are free to choose, but you are not free from the consequences of your choices. The choices you make as legislators today will have an impact on our little state for many years. I'm currently writing in my second book that every small act has consequences. Everything we do outdoors is interrelated. Changes in wildlife and the forest products industry seem to be tied to things we do today and things that happened 50 years ago. We can't go back. I don't want to. But I'll write in the second book that hopefully people that are making the decisions today have the hindsight to look to the past and the foresight to look to the future. I'll make the point that a conserved or protected land inventory needs to be as accurate as possible so that we can predict and anticipate these consequences. Current use lands need to be included. That acreage has been a major part of the continuation of improving forest management practices and the protection of land in Vermont since the creation of that program in 1978 by your legislative predecessors. Please continue their important work. Please make the changes requested in H70. Finally, we must continue working hard to ensure that Vermont folks have the land to grow, harvest, and make a living. The forestry and farming communities of Vermont with their working lands are what make our state beautiful. Please recognize that land that can't be used is a death sentence to rural Vermonters. Every piece of land that forestry and farming are being restricted from using is another one of those 1,000 pinpricks to our future. Thanks again for giving an average Vermonter the opportunity to be able to express his opinion. Part of what makes our state great. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Members have questions? Not seeing any, but thank you again.
You're welcome. Chair.
Sam Lincoln.
Morning.
Right.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify on H70. For the record, my name is Sam Lincoln. I'm a multi-generational landowner and business owner from Randolph Center. Our family's land is enrolled in the Use Value Appraisal Program, or UVA as it's commonly known. I've worked in the woods since I was young. My first chainsaw given to me at 12 years old. As an adult, my first logging job was salvaging timber on the Waitsfield Gap after the 1998 ice storm. I've been a certified master logger since 2016, serve on the board of directors of the Professional Logging Contractors of the Northeast, and I previously served as Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation from 2017 to 2020. I've harvested timber for more than 60 landowners within 15 miles of my front porch, and most of those properties were enrolled in the Use Value Appraisal Program. I support H70 and the inclusion of UVA enrolled land in the conserved land inventory and in the definition of natural resource management area. Science, experience, human curiosity lead us to continuously improve how we interact with the environment. One of those improvements is our increasing value and appreciation for keeping land in an undeveloped state for a multitude of reasons. UVA has been an incalculably valuable tool for improving our stewardship. It has also been essential and responsive to addressing a significant cost of ownership, which is property taxes. Act 59 calls for conservation at all scales and maintaining ecological connectivity. The most recent draft states that the entire connectivity network is needed for ecological function. That network already exists, and those diverse scales exist, in large part through UVA enrolled land. UVA provides landscape stability. It provides flexibility for families. It allows working stewardship while keeping land intact. Permanent conservation works for some landowners, but it does not work for all. We hear about trends in forest loss and biodiversity decline due to development, but we rarely ask private landowners what I believe is the most important question. Why did you subdivide your land? Understanding root causes is essential to enacting sustainable solutions. For many families, the answer is economics. Permanent conservation does not solve the economic pressures landowners face. Meanwhile, mills are closing, markets are shrinking. The forest economy, which has supported stewardship across rural Vermont for generations, is under enormous strain. That strain contributes directly to fragmentation when landowners lose their ability to generate revenue. UVA connects the dots between tracts of permanently conserved land. UVA enrolled landowners already own the land. They pay property taxes on it. They follow management plans developed by licensed professionals and they are approved by regulators. They pay the cost of implementing those plans out of their own pocket. They steward habitat, water quality, and forest health. They are doing conservation work today. The financial cost to support and enhance UVA in a process of continuous improvement will be far less than purchasing development rights of such a large portion of Vermont's private lands. UVA is not the only conservation tool. Permanent easements are also not the only solution either. Vermont needs a mix of tools, and we should recognize the landowners that have already chosen to conserve their land, many for generations, through the use value appraisal program. Including UVA does not dilute conservation, it strengthens it. Not having these landowners at the table since the inception of this effort risks missing the full picture. One example that I'll give of a missed opportunity in land use policy is that under Act 181, 5 and 10 acre house lots remain part of the regional planning conversations. In my view, nothing has fragmented rural Vermont more than those scattered lots. Orange County doesn't have large housing or commercial developments threatening our landscape. We have spaghetti lots up and down our rural roads with single family homes. A generation ago, my town was dominated by 100 to 500 acre farms with forest tracts. While those of us that work the land have watched the increasing fragmentation that limits forest access and agricultural viability, the land use regulations modernization process has not taken up suggestions for provisions such as implementing conservation subdivisions as a broader tool with smaller clustered housing lots with larger portions conserved. Without input from boots on the ground landowners, I'm not sure how the trends in fragmentation will be redirected, other than using the full weight of Act 250 being applied as a deterrent only to those who can't afford the cost. If we're serious about connectivity and landscape integrity, we must align policy with the way Vermonters have actually protected the land, and UVA is central to that. Our demonstrated actions and definition of conservation should count too. I respectfully ask you to advance H70 so that other committees in the full legislature can debate this amendment to Act 59. Including UVA land in the inventory equitably recognizes the stewardship of a broad cross-section of Vermonters as we work toward a common goal of protecting our landscape. It's not a partisan issue, it's a rural issue, and it's an equity issue that's being raised by constituents who have invested in conservation for generations. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Representative Sakowicz.
Sam, thank you so much for being here. This is really great testimony. I share a lot of your concerns. We don't have time to discuss them now. I would love to follow up with you and have conversations over coffee back in Randolph sometime in the near future. explore some of our common ground, which I think clearly exists. But I do have a short maybe question. You very quickly said something about enhanced UVA, but I'm not sure what maybe you meant by that. I was wondering if you could maybe just quickly tell us maybe what you meant by choosing that word.
Thank you for the question, Representative Sakowicz. I would say that the UVA manual, the UVA program standards have evolved. I mean, it started out as a tax program and there's all types of, it's become a big program with a lot of requirements to maintain eligibility. And if there are concerns about how that meets the definition of conservation, then include the people that it run, the foresters that manage the landowners in a way to say, what do you need and how can we reduce the risk that you decide to withdraw your land and make it a better program to meet all these goals? I guess that's how I would quickly respond to an enhanced UVA.
Representative Austin and Tagliavia.
Do you have any idea how much Vermonters pay for the current use program, to keep the current use program going, and what, where that money comes from in terms of our taxes?
Well, in terms of, I understand your question about the quote unquote cost of use value appraisal program. And the way that I see it as a landowner enrolled is that I'm being maybe taxed more properly on my actual use of the land as undeveloped. So the highest and our assessors and listers look at land as highest and best use for development. I consider my land's highest and best use is to remain forest or farmland. So with that philosophy in mind, I would respond that I don't know. I don't want to quote an incorrect number. I'm not an expert on the cost and finances of it, but I believe it comes out of various funds that are reduced income to reduce tax revenue through those equations that are sent out to the towns every year.
Yeah.
Representative Tagliavia.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you to all the witnesses who come today to testify. To Representative Sakowicz, I would like to hear all the questions that you have for the witness right now, because this is a very important topic. It brings up another question and a bone of contention I have with the statement, Madam Chair, that you made, that we're going to restrict testimony to 10 minutes. If we're in the people's house, I suggest we let the people speak. I am a member of the Rural Caucus as well, as many of you know, and we have this time limitation in the Rural Caucus as well. And there are a lot of people who take time off from their jobs, and when they come to the people's house, they should be allowed to speak. Apparently, the only bloviating that goes on in here is on the debate floor. Taxpayers need to have their voice heard. They need to believe that when they show up here, they're going to be heard. So limiting everybody to 10 minutes, especially on a topic that is not a fan, you're not a fan of, I find very offensive.
I'll just say, I'm trying to be respectful of everyone's time and the schedule that we had. We were not expecting the floor to go long today. It's not uncommon for us to share the witness testimony time because lots of people took effort to be here this morning.
And in the future, I believe the week beginning March 10th, we are going to be spending a lot of late nights here probably. So there's no reason why we can't do a late day today. I can be here to midnight. Anybody wants to stay.
I have to leave it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for your testimony. Very helpful. It's the beginning of a conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Tucker.
Hi, so my name's Peter Tucker. I am the Director of Advocacy and Public Policy for the Vermont Association of Realtors. And I'd like to thank the chair and the committee for inviting us here today to talk about changes to Act 59 through this bill H70. Vermont Association of Realtors are about 2,000 members spread pretty evenly across the state. Who work with property owners every day. I mean, that's what we do. I have a government affairs committee that are members from around the state who review policy and give me direction, as I come here to speak with you guys today. So, We think that the goal of H70, which is to change, slight changes to Act 59, is a good goal, to include use value appraisal properties in the inventory of conserved land inventory. This proposes to make some small changes. In section 6, conserve means permanently protected, and, to remove those words. And really, the way we've looked at this bill is, the definition of conserved. What does that really mean generally? And then what does that mean, specific to, to Act 59? In this section, natural resource management areas are defined as something that can be included in these areas. And also in section 6, that although other long-term land protection mechanisms and measures that achieve the goals of the Vermont conservation design that are enforceable and accountable and that support ecologically function and connected landscape may be considered. We think that this is, really pointing to the use value appraisal program. When you consider natural resource areas in section 3, which is just slightly above, is a subject to a long-term sustainable management plan. And then this H70 adds language or agricultural lands or forest lands enrolled in the use value appraisal, really helps define, what those conserved lands should be. One of the concerns that the Government Affairs Committee had with the definition of conserved lands is a common definition of conserved lands, which is land is protected in perpetuity, and that that's kind of the sticking point here. Is that that's a commonly used definition, but is it the definition that would allow use value appraisal to be involved? Our Government Affairs Committee was very concerned that that by adding use value appraisal to using the regular definition of conserved lands would put this permanent permanently protected designation on the land use, current land use, and that is not at all the intention of the bill, as has been clearly described to me by the sponsor of the bill. But we're trying to help reach those 30 by 30 and 50 by 50 thresholds that the committee is so interested in. In doing research for this hearing, you look at the Vermont Fish and Wildlife site on conservation options. They produce a nice flyer of different conservation options, and one of them is the use value appraisal program. And they say that the use value appraisal program, or current use, is a state program that reduces your property taxes in exchange for actively managing your forest land. This program is, and these are the Fish and Wildlife words, is a temporary conservation option. And I want to come back to that in a second. That is in effect until you, the landowner, or a subsequent landowner decides to remove the property from the program for a fee. That's the way current use works. Temporary, the temporary option is not in perpetuity for sure, but temporary also can have a much longer range definition, I believe. As part of Act 59, BHCB was required to produce a report, which they did in 2024 for this committee. And in that report, BHCB, in their initial discussion of how many acres have been conserved, points to current use as or the state use value appraisal program, preserving roughly 2.4 million acres. And now it's at roughly 2.5 million acres, because if you look at the amount of acreage enrolled, it has increased in every year since 2010. So it is a positive program. I also did research on, how long do people stay in the land use appraisal program? Because, if they're coming in and going out all the time, I don't think that achieves the efforts that the committee would be interested in seeing. But current land use appraisal, long-term commitment, the program is designed to keep working lands in production. And for many, it acts as a permanent voluntary restriction against development. The other fact that I found was that there is a very low withdrawal rate from current use. Data shows that a very low percentage of land, roughly 0.2 per year, is withdrawn, indicating that the land often stays in the program for decades or changes ownership without leaving the program. So I think that, the committee's concern is this a legitimate, long-term, approach to land management that would allow for use value appraisal lands to be added to the land inventory, the conserved land inventory. And I think that ultimately is a question for the committee to decide. We believe that it is. It's valuable, it's managed. It meets the requirements of Act 59. Although long-term land protection mechanisms and measures that achieve the goal of the Vermont conservation design and that are enforceable and accountable, which is what current use does, and to support ecological function and connected landscape may be considered. That is the language in Act 59. How you get there, I think, is a matter of terminology. Do you want to change the definition of conserved to be conserved both permanently and long-term? Do you want to just consider conserved to be, use value appraisal and permanently preserved? I think that's also up to the committee to decide. But we certainly think that to achieve 30 by 30 and 50 by 50, including land use value properties in that calculation is the correct approach.
Thanks for your testimony.
Sure. Yeah.
Representative Tagovailoa.
In the past year, do you have any statistics that you could give us with respect to the number of parcels been taken out of the UVA program and what that dollar amount of that penalty was?
I believe I do. Let's see, withdrawals from enrolled land use. Actually, let me just can get it right here. It's a little clearer for me. Yeah, 2025. Acres developed and requested for removal or acres withdrawn from land use were 20,000 acres. Acres developed and a lien removal requested was 1,400 acres. Number of completed withdrawals 517, which is down from the last couple of years. And that's a let's see. Where am I at here? Sorry. This is the use value or the tax department's report on current use. Yeah.
For clarification, at 20,000 was the number of actual transfers
20,000 acres.
of acres?
Yeah. 517 completed withdrawals, representing 20,000 acres.
How many, probably wouldn't know how many acres actually went into the program at the same time?
Into?
Yes.
Just see what I come up with here. Values. So it's owners. I have the total acres in. So, but go up between 24 and 25, it increased by 15,000 acres, roughly.
So a net gain, considerable net gain.
That's correct. Yeah. And it has been a gain ever since 2012, every year.
All right, thanks for your testimony.
Great. Thank you. Mhm.
Representative Lipscomb.
Record Jed Lipsky, Chair Sheldon, Vice Chair Labor and Committee. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify today on H70. As many of you know, I serve on the House Committee on Agriculture, Food Resiliency and Forestry, and I've had a long career as a logging contractor, independent, and a certified master logger. What you may not know about me is my long and extensive experience as a conservationist. So when I suggested to and thanked the opportunity when I was invited, if I was interested in testifying, I was one to testify as a conservationist and as a master logger. And I have been an active conservationist in both Vermont, other neighboring New England states, as well as around the world. In the early 1970s, I served as the assistant director of the Conservation Society of Southern Vermont. During that tenure, we conserved Pikes Falls, Hamilton Falls, Halifax Gorge, and 8,000 acres of river corridor along the West River in Windham County. The CSSV also received status as interveners in licensing of the Vermont Yankee nuclear plant, which I was at the table with the Nuclear Regulatory Committee and EPA down in Brattleboro with federal hearings. We're mostly advocating for the impacts on the environment, the ecological communities surrounding, and specifically the impacts on the Connecticut River ecology. I also served and authored as the first planning board chairman in the town of Win Hall and the zoning administrative officer, and authored the first ecologically based town plan in the state of Vermont. That occurred within 6 months of the passage by our legislature of Act 250. Many years later, I volunteered as a pilot for numerous conservation initiatives in the Congo, Botswana, Namibia, and South Africa. These included air support for Mega Transect in 1999 to 2000 for National Geographic, and the Wildlife Conservation Society and EcoFact and other organizations. In 2003 and 2004, I flew as a bush pilot on the most extensive elephant count in the Okavango Delta, Botswana, neighboring countries, to create the first and largest trans-frontier wildlife conservation corridor in the world. And I know this committee has taken up and is very much concerned with wildlife corridors. This conservation program was for Elephants Without Borders under the oversight of the Conservation International of Africa. I highlight these credentials and experiences to demonstrate that conservation and active timber management are not mutually exclusive. They are indelibly connected. So, I speak today to the Vermont Forest Strategic Roadmap also, which was legislation passed by this body prior to my service in 2022, and all of its goals to be in support of the both the forest economy, sustainability, as well as all the other complex values that Vermonters require from our forest land. So I will be very specific now on my points regarding H70. I believe H70 is a critical and necessary measure to ensure Vermont can achieve its conservation objectives without diminishing productive farmland that rural Vermonters rely on. Vermont has pledged to protect 30% of the land area by 2030 and 50% by 2050. The problem with conservation from the logging industry's perspective is not conservation itself, Loggers are probably Vermont's oldest conservationists. However, if conservation takes productive forests out of production, it is counterintuitive. Each acre of land removed from production contributes to the reduction in wood supply and opportunity loss for many facets of the Vermont forest economy. Mills, foresters, loggers require a stable, predictable supply of timber. As the working land base area is reduced, the pressure on the remaining acres increases, making it more expensive, less sustainable in the long term. It also forces the wood supply and/or manufacturers to be sourced from farther away. Economically viable markets for all class of timber are necessary to ensure sustainable forest management. Logging contractors are already operating in a reduced margin scenario. Inconsistent weather patterns have reduced annual harvesting seasons, and all of the costs for contractors have increased. Contractors are being asked to accomplish more with less markets, less time, less access, all the while paying more for everything. Similar to farmers, loggers are price takers, not price setters. Working forests are not the problem. They are part of the solution. Forests provide the greatest long-term climate benefits when they're actively managed and regenerated. Young growing forests absorb carbon at higher rates. Sustainable harvesting followed by replanting and/or natural regeneration ensures continuous carbon sequestration while also storing carbon in long-lived wood products. Use value appraisal land is already doing the job of conservation. Use value appraisal requires professional forest management plans and effective long-term management to conserve forest lands and keep it forested rather than developed. These areas protect wildlife habitats, water quality, and ecological connectivity, while still allowing sustainable timber harvest, which are all goals of conservation. H70 properly points out land enrolled in UVA should be counted toward Vermont's conservation goals because it is already protected as conserved land. This recognition is vital to ensure that UVA land has greater benefits beyond taxation as being considered conserved. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Representative Austin.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. I'm just like thinking of the worst case scenario. So we put current use land into the equation of, let's say, 50-50. Everybody decides to sell their land at some point in 20, 30 years. What happens to the 50-50?
Representative Austin, it's a good question. Worst cases are important to consider. And during those following 30 or 20 years, it's maybe 23 years or so from now, some of that land may be put in permanent conservation. May.
Yeah.
Meaning that's another option. And there are other, farmland. We are finding farmers regularly rely on selling conservation easements to survive and hopefully thrive or, transition into a new generation. So that's a projection I can't
Right. I do appreciate
responsibly answer.
serve the land now. All of you, I appreciate that so much. I'm concerned about the future and, kind of it's just the unknown to me. That's concerning to me. And I apologize that I have to leave for like an hour. I think I'll be here. Thank you for your.
Representative North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Lipsky, for sharing your professional experience with us today. Is just wondering, in your professional experience, boots on the ground experience, what is the actual difference between land that's in current use conservation and land that is conserved in perpetuity? In terms of actually how it's used, what the regulations are on the land, in your experience, what have you seen?
These are my experiences and observations. That program was set up to keep forest connectivity in for the long term for all the benefits it brings to
Program you're referring to now?
the use value appraisal program. And what I have observed in the breadth of my career is an incredible evolution and expansion of the demands and responsibilities for a working forest or forest land. The role it plays, since the Clean Water Act of 1974, clean water, the turbidity and protecting the soils from erosion in the Champlain Valley watershed, all the connected watersheds that, whether it's meant for Magog, the Connecticut River Valley, or the Champlain, which eventually drains north. The demand from sportsmen for hunting and wildlife habitat, the demand for songbird habitat, a real bellwether of how we're doing in our greenhouse gas challenges. Critical importance, and I've watched timber harvest from the time when I was working with Bill Sargent 50 years ago, how we manage where wildlife habitat and songbird habitat and climate resiliency considerations have all risen high in the responsibilities. And we, as timber harvesters and foresters, have adapted to this, not begrudgingly. We are trying to sustain our responsibilities, but there are other forces, within the markets, and Forester Sargent pointed out the demise in our lifetime of the loss of processing Vermont logs in Vermont and going direct to the wood chain that served Vermonters. That loss has been catastrophic. And, I believe that the UVA, to narrow it down, the difference is that UVA owners sign a contract to manage for the complex benefits that are demanded from the forest, whereas conserved land, I've sat on land trust boards for many years, many of which have never cut one stem, whereas private landowners are motivated for a whole variety of values to manage. So in that way, I feel the UVA program has been very beneficial to the broad demands and help sustain this industry. Now, when there's a tornado, and I've done salvage all over the Northeast, or a wind event where it flattens recreation, outdoor rec is a big demand for Vermont forests. UVA members voluntarily contribute. In fact, I think 70+% of all mountain bike and trail systems are because forest landowners are willing to share their land for these other broad demands of the forest. But when you have a very severe weather event, and all of Katy Hill mountain bike, regionally renowned system is flattened, it's people like loggers, my son and myself on the northern end, another Orleans County logger that spent 7 days a week all winter, environmentally responsible way, cleaning up, opening up, so the trail restorers could go in and complete the work by June of that same year. So we're heroes then, but when we go to try to harvest a woodlot, that appreciated status drops way down on the value chain. Just anecdotal.
I understand and I'll totally understand you're extolling the benefits of current use, but I was really trying to understand practically on the ground. What is your experience in attempting to work or working with land that is either permanently conserved in perpetuity versus land that's in UVA?
It's very different. It has to do with covenants. In some cases, let's talk about state lands, which are by nature conserved. One small wildlife cut on Little River Forest, which our committee visited, it took 12 years to get this tiny harvest through the process and public input and litigations. That couldn't support one logger for 3 months.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to understand. Are you saying that the current land and current use programs are better managed than land that's in perpetuity, preserved in perpetuity, conserved in perpetuity? Is that, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to understand.
I'm saying they are managed, and they are managed by professionals and held to the highest standard.
And are they meeting the goals of conservation? Is land?
Yes, because they are, the trees in Vermont on UVA land are getting older and doing more for what I would say the carbon cycle for both storage, and sequestration.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
This is the last question. We're going to move on to other witnesses.
Just so I'm sure that I heard you correctly, you said something about people putting their land in a conservation easement, farmers, I think you said, just to survive. What did you mean by that?
Well, when you sell or choose to place a permanent conservation easement on a portion of your farm, that is a source of revenue. And that may be the difference between going bankrupt, auctioning off your cattle and assets, and surviving for another generation. That's what I meant by that.
Thanks for your testimony.
You're very welcome. Thank you, committee.
We have Laura Oates.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will try to be really brief. I don't have any photos for you today. Lauren Oates with the Nature Conservancy in Vermont. It's nice to see you all. Happy Friday. I don't typically read, but I'm going to. First, I want to be clear that this conversation today is not an argument about the value of the use value appraisal program or current use. It is an incredible tool that can be applied to both permanently conserved and non-conserved lands. You'd be hard pressed to find any conservation organization in the state of Vermont that is opposed to use value appraisal. In fact, many of us have been in this very committee year over year advocating for the protection of current use and in fact the expansion of it. All of us probably have come in at least once for that. This isn't a value about UVA. It's a phenomenal program that Vermonters should be proud of and continue to support. Second, it's important to note that a significant portion of permanently conserved lands are in use value appraisal, acknowledging the important role of our working landscape and its ability to support ecological function too. This is a Venn diagram. It's not an either or. So you have permanently conserved lands. Some of those lands are in use value appraisal. And then you have non-conserved lands that can be in use value appraisal. The conserved land inventory that's been part of the Act 59 process to date estimates about 19% are in that natural resource management area category. Close to nearly all non-state owned lands in that category are enrolled in use value appraisal. Nearly all of the land that the Nature Conservancy in Vermont owns and stewards, which is about 30,000 acres, is enrolled in current use. It's a program that we regularly highlight with landowners. A recent example from Bennington County, we were down with a landowner who was really interested and even signed an agreement to confer her land to us. She decided she was not interested in permanent conservation at the moment, and so we directed her towards the different categories of UVA and helped her figure out enrollment into that program. It's to say, I agree with Representative Lipsky that conservation and forest management are not mutually exclusive at all. We at TNC Vermont spend a great deal of our own strategic work and time in forest management. Working forests are absolutely part of the conservation solution. Third, let's be clear that UVA is, however, not a permanent conservation tool, which is okay, and it's even important for greater enrollment and access to the program for Vermont landowners. When Act 59 was just a bill moving through several committees, those of you around at the time heard many of us testify about the suite of conservation tools that are available to Vermont and Vermonters. We all use in varying capacities for achieving myriad conservation and economic outcomes. That is still true today. The various categories of current use apply to different landscapes and protection levels, allow for a diverse suite of management practices, which yield important ecological and social outcomes. In fact, we can overlay UVA across both conserved and non-conserved lands in an incredible and noteworthy part of its utility and success. The overlay allows for different types of forest management practices that create diverse forest and forestry outcomes. So H70 is not about the value of UVA, but it is about the issue of permanence. The Nature Conservancy in Vermont stands by Act 59 goals and vision, which aim to develop a plan to get us to 30% permanently protected by 2030, including a significant portion, again, that is open for management, around 19% of the inventory currently. Therefore, we oppose H70 as drafted, specifically the removal of the word permanent from the definition of conserve for 2030 goals and statute. We feel doing so undermines the intent of Act 59 and the thoughtful planning process that is currently underway and being led in good faith by the Vermont Housing Conservation Board and the Agency of Natural Resources. The good work of inventorying existing conservation tools and developing additional solutions for our natural and working landscape is underway via this process right now. Listening sessions are happening across the state. We fully suspect that this process will address the issue of UVA and how it counts or doesn't towards 2050 goals. And we appreciate how robust the process has been to date. I encourage you, actually, if you continue to hear testimony, to invite in folks from VHCB or ANR to talk about the work that they're doing and the inventory and how UVA is being addressed there. So I have.
Thanks for your testimony.
Welcome.
Representative Pritchard.
How much land does the Nature Conservancy have enrolled in UVA?
So we own-ish 30,000 acres and steward that. Basically, any acre that isn't swampy is enrolled. The vast majority, I would estimate 98% probably, in the various categories. So there are different tiers of UVA.
How much have you withdrawn from that program?
We have not.
Zero.
Yeah, permanently conserved. That's the Venn diagram, right? So there's the permanently conserved that isn't enrolled in UVA, permanently conserved and UVA, not conserved UVA. So we're mostly in that middle bucket right there.
Okay.
Thanks for your testimony. Representative North.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your testimony. So what is the effect on property taxes that's due for land that is put into permanent conservation with the Nature Conservancy?
Like adjacent parcels, landowners,
The
or
actual land that's purchased by the Nature Conservancy or put in easement? What is the actual effect on the property tax for that?
well, it would depend on the level of enrollment and the type of conservation work that we're doing there, but I can get you those numbers happily.
But it is reduced. The property tax gets reduced.
Yeah.
That's put in. Like, just rough figures, is it like what, 2% reduction or a half, or, I mean, is it significant?
I would guess, and I would be told by staff that I'm wrong, so I'll get you the number, happy to send it to you.
Okay. So what is the primary reason why most people put their land into land trust easements for permanent conservation?
I don't think there's a primary reason. The goals of permanent conservation can go all the way from purely agricultural to all the way to wildlands and everything in between. It really just depends on working with the landowner to understand what they want from their land.
How many farmers who put their land in the land trust have said that's the only way that they can figure out that they could stay viable?
I don't know the answer to that, but I would definitely invite you to bring in Vermont Land Trust to answer it.
Thanks for your testimony.
Thanks.
Next up is Jamie Fidel.
Just want to load this. Good morning. Okay, good. Thanks for having me in. Jamie Fidel, Vice President with Audubon for Vermont. And just wanted to run through some slides. I'm going to do this very quickly. And just from Audubon's perspective, as we think about this opportunity, we're thinking about the utility of being able to look at how do we maintain a landscape that works for resilience purposes, and that works for the species that we have here, and that works for communities, and that works for us as we interact in our communities, both from economic perspective, ecological health perspective. Audubon is definitely tracking this very concerning trend that we're seeing right now, that we have massive bird declines happening, and birds are a very important indicator for overall wildlife health, ecological health, ecosystem health. And so many of you may have seen a very important, this was in Science magazine. This was a comprehensive study that was done that shows that we're close to 3 billion birds being lost since 1970. And here in the Eastern Forest, we're not immune to the effect of this biodiversity loss. I was struck by this headline just yesterday that I saw in the New York Times, just from a couple of days ago. New studies coming out that birds are declining even faster than was expected. And so we need to look at this, and we really need to think about how do we maintain our landscape into the future so that we can hopefully do something about these losses that we're seeing. It was helpful for me to just go through Act 59, because I guess I want to start out by saying that I agree with a lot of the sentiment that's been expressed here. The UVA program is extremely important. It's probably the most important conservation program when you think about the acreage that's been enrolled, the flexibility that landowners have to come into the program, the effect that it has on the landscape. And it's not the only conservation program, but it's of paramount importance. And as a member of the Technical Advisory Committee, working to inform the conservation plan through Act 59, it's on my mind as an important part of the process. I just wanted to highlight a couple parts of the language of Act 59, because I feel like Act 59 already accommodates a lot of what I've been hearing this morning. And so I just kind of want to quickly walk through that. As is recommended or recognized in the legislative findings of Act 59, we need a full range of conservation approaches in order to implement Act 59. And that's acknowledged in the findings. And that includes supporting private landowner programs and easements. I often look at Act 59 and I'm struck by sometimes the focus just on the conservation goals and not the vision of Act 59. I feel like for me, there's three important categories in Act 59. There's the 30 by 30 goal, there's the 50 by 50 goal, and there's implementing the vision of Act 59. And all of those are in play through the conservation planning process and the inventory, which I'll point out. So it's important to remind ourselves that this is the vision of Act 59, and it's to maintain a lot of different values, including supporting working farms and forests, and sustaining biodiversity. And then there's the 30 by 30 goals and the 50 by 50 goals. And as we've already been talking about, as Ellen talked to yesterday, there's different sort of, there's an emphasis on permanent conservation and 2030 goal, predominantly permanent, but then the opportunity to look at other durable programs for the 2050 goals. And so that's important to acknowledge. And the inventory shall include a summary of the totality of conservation practices, both permanent and intermediate. And so if I read Act 59 correctly, the a program like UVA should be included in the inventory. That's what Act 59 authorizes. And so that's why there was a deliberate recognition in the beginning of the drafting of this bill that we don't just want to look at permanent conservation when we're conducting an inventory. Both intermediate and permanent programs are important to understand. And then furthermore, the Act instructs over time, as we continue to track the land that's in the inventory, to track progress toward meeting both the vision and the goals, not just the goals, but the overarching vision for maintaining an intact and resilient landscape for a lot of different values, and the goals shall be updated biannually. So it's a very comprehensive approach. The plan itself is supposed to include both strategies to meet the goals and the vision of the bill. And the strategies for achieving the vision and goal, while continuing, and this is specific language in the conservation plan, protect Vermont's agricultural land, working forests, recreational land, surface lands. So the plan is supposed to be very comprehensive. It's not at the exclusion of working lands at all. It's very inclusive of thinking about their utility. And then I would just finally say here, again, underscoring that it's in multiple places. The Act 59 underscores that the plan has to have recommendations to implement both the vision and goals while enhancing the state's current investments and commitments to working lands enterprises and working forests in this language. So as I read Act 59, I always seen it as an important endorsement of all the principles that have been expressed this morning. And it's centered on trying to maintain a landscape as has been outlined by the Agency of Natural Resources through Vermont Conservation Design, which really looks at all the important features on the landscape that we need to maintain to have ecological health, which is directly related to our economic health in the state. I won't go through all of Vermont Conservation Design. It's about 72% of the state. The overall vision of the Act tries to get at strategies to maintain our landscape at that level, a whole diverse suite of strategies. As has already been highlighted by Lauren, that if you look at this chart coming out of the inventory, the predominant majority of lands that are being conserved in Vermont, if you look at both the biodiversity areas and the natural resource management areas, are working lands. And so as conservation happens in Vermont, permanent conservation and enrollment in current use, it's benefiting working lands. As working lands are permanently conserved, we're helping to maintain the overall viability of forestry enterprises and management on our lands. And so that's the trend as conservation plays out in Vermont. And yes, there is a portion for wildlands, and that's valuable too, because this is all based on landowners' values and their election to exercise what they see as their property value, their property rights, as far as do they want to conserve their land and what are their values for conserving our land. But just the trend is that it overall benefits working lands. And then there's a really important report that I was recently reviewing that the Agency of Natural Resources did on implementing Vermont Conservation Design. And it talks about the complementary role of both UVA and permanent land conservation. And because I'm short on time, I won't get into the pie chart here, but you can look at it in the report. But what it highlights is that if we look at Vermont Conservation Design highest priority forest blocks, our most important forest blocks in the state, that about 43% are enrolled in UVA. About 3/4 of these acres do not have permanent conservation. So this is both talking about the importance of the UVA program in keeping these forest blocks functional and working and productive. It also highlights that 3/4 of them don't have permanent conservation. And so they could be subject to fluctuation over time as far as their status. I think this other statistic is really helpful because this is a Trust for Public Land analysis that was done back in 2022, so this needs to be updated. But it looks at, if you take the categories that are in Act 59 right now, the ecological reserves and the biodiversity areas and the natural resource management areas, we're at what you already know, close to 27% conserved. If you look at the UVA lands that overlap with those, it's about 500, close to 541,000. So there's already a pretty strong integration of UVA lands. And then there's a lot of lands that are enrolled in UVA that are not conserved. About 30% of the landscape. So if you add that up, the important story is that when you consider UVA, and we do need to consider UVA, we've got over half of the landscape in some kind of conserved status, whether we call it intermediate or permanent, without getting into the semantics. It also highlights that we are already at the 50 by 50 goal. And so I think for us, a big concern is, what does that mean for the whole planning effort? Do we then sort of walk away from it? Do we say we're there and we shouldn't look at all the other strategies that we need to meet where landowners are? We don't think about the future trends of what's going to happen on our landscape. After COVID, we saw a lot of lands coming out of UVA at a rate that we hadn't experienced before. Will that happen again when the next crisis happens and people start thinking about moving back to Vermont? As climate change impacts are occurring more and more, and people are actually literally moving to Vermont because we have a very attractive place to live as a refuge from a lot of other places that are going to see impact. What would be the impact to our conservation programs and land development opportunities? And so we just have to be aware of that volatility. So this is all to say that I would end by saying that don't think it makes sense to as H70 suggests, to weaken taking a hard look and supporting permanent conservation as part of the conservation goals in the Act. The Act 59 process, as the language I've shown you, takes all of these issues that we're discussing this morning into consideration. And I think there's going to be a very robust conversation on where does UVA fit in to the overall conservation plan? How does it help implement the vision? How does it help implement the goals that do have some flexibility into 2050 to look at whether programs are durable or not? We need to continue to recognize the value of the UVA program in the conservation plan and continue to track enrolled acreage in the inventory as is instructed and authorized. Need to continue to support the UVA program and its financial stability in the state, and continue to celebrate that has a lot of flexibility, and that's works for a lot of landowners. And that is a very important intermediate conservation program in Vermont. And then I'd say we should, through the Act 59 process, look for strategies or incentives to perhaps promote longer term enrollment in UVA. I had to call when I started at Audubon last summer. I received 2 calls from landowners who, I know at least one of them was enrolled in UVA, and they want to conserve their land permanently. They're very concerned about what's happening to their land when they're no longer owning it. They've reached out to a lot of land trusts. It's a 100-acre parcel, and they don't have an opportunity to conserve their land. They want, it's working lands. They want to conserve it permanently, and they can't. They actually don't have an option to do it. So we need to look through Act 59 at all the opportunities for that landowner if that's what they want to do. Could we perhaps look at a voluntary election in UVA to enroll for permanent status or long-term enrollment? What would that look like? There's going to be pros and cons to that. What kind of incentives can we put into UVA if a landowner actually wants to enroll for a durable period of time? And keep it voluntary. That would not be something that's required. And we need to really understand the pros and cons of what that looks like. So that has to be studied. That's just an idea of the kind of creative thinking I'm hoping can occur through the Act 59 process. So with that, I'll end there. Happy to, yeah, if there's time, answer any questions. Thanks.
Thanks for your testimony, Representative Tagliavia.
Thank you. Could you give a little bit more detail about this 100-acre parcel where there was somebody who was interested in conserving their land and they were unable to? How is that possible? What conditions exist that would prevent someone permanently signing a conservation easement?
They have to work with a land trust in order to hold that easement. And for many land trusts, and for good reason, there's only a certain amount of capacity to work with landowners. It's usually at a certain parcel size. So it doesn't usually work for the smaller landowners, you know, and compared to some of the larger parcels, there's stewardship costs. Not all landowners can pay for the stewardship costs that are associated with putting an easement on their property. And so certain landowners can do it who are able to work with land trusts. Some landowners can't. They don't have the option. So the Act 59 process right now is looking at greater capacity for smaller land trusts, regional land trusts, to be able to accelerate conservation opportunities with landowners like this. But they're enrolled in current use, and when they pass on, and it's their children who are inheriting the land, they could take the land out. And they'll pay a 10% penalty on the fair market value of that parcel. And that's what they can do. And so there's no guarantee there. They can't bind their children from taking the land out.
Representative North and then Pritchard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Jamie, for coming in and giving us this testimony today. And so you've indicated with the numbers on the screen there that if we included all of UVA, if we passed age 70, basically we'd be at 56%, meeting the requirements of Act 59 for 2050. So my question before you put that slide up is, why don't we just include age 70 and claim raging success and claim victory, and we could all go home and be done, right? That would be awesome. But your answer to that you said immediately following was, well, what would the impact be in the future if people sold off, if people backed out of their UVA agreements, right? And so my question to you is, don't we know exactly what goes in and out of the UVA program every year? And so it would be and for the past 20 years, it's a steady, monotonically increasing value in UVA. If that curve ever started to dip down, wouldn't we immediately know that and be able to take action?
Yeah, so we can track this. I was just looking at the numbers.
Yeah, exactly. We have that.
I mean, the numbers that were mentioned before, there was a decline, 5,000 acre decline.
As I read the
No,
report,
15,000 net increase. The 15,000 was net.
That's why-
Above the
that's what I
20 that
asked.
was taken out.
am I still sharing my screen? I'll show you.
15,000 net increase. So 35 was put in, 20 were taken out, 15 net.
Here, if you just give me 1 second, I can actually pull this up. I was just looking at this.
I mean, the question is, we already have monitoring in place. We know exactly what goes in and what goes out every year. We get the report. So
We
it's
do.
not like, oh no, we won't know. Yeah, we will know.
So I saw from 24 to 25. It's not up here, but anyway, based on that property valuation report,
Yeah, but
total acres went from 2,574,742 in 24 to 2,589,956. So let's just roughly call that 15.
Yes.
15. That was the annual current use enrollment. But then when you add in the lands that came out, which we were citing before based on the withdrawal section, it was 20,000 acres. So there's actually a net decline.
No, that's the numbers that are the total in. So that's after the deduction is taken out.
This could be a very good question to ask property valuation and review, just so we all are operating on the same facts. I think your point is a good one. I think what you're saying is that over time, there's a lot of land staying in the program, and we should celebrate that. I agree with that. And I think that the plan should acknowledge that front and center. And I think that we should continue to make sure that landowners have appropriate avenues if they want to permanently conserve their land, and that we actually plan for a durable future. And I think things are going to change over time. I think there's going to be much more pressure on our landscape. I think there's going to be much more pressure on landowners to develop. We know we have very complicated challenges right now to understand how to fund our schools and the relationship of property taxes. And we have a lot of, as I was showing you, still a lot of land in Vermont that's not enrolled. And so I would just ask you this question right now. If about 3/4 of our lands are forested right now, and we just kind of take the baseline of the 55% we're looking at, which is not just forests, it's other lands. But do we want to see over time, let's say, a 20 to 25 or 30%, reduction of our natural areas in the state? And we don't. So if we look at implementing Vermont conservation design where we have natural areas now, and we try and figure out the suite of opportunities to do that, I would argue we should continue to look at ways to have permanent conservation be a strong option for landowners, and factor in the current use program into that, and look at how are we doing as far as implementing Vermont conservation design. We need both, but we shouldn't dilute the tools that we need to look at permanent conservation, so we ensure into the future that we have enough land that can sustain both the working lands values we're talking about and the ecological values that we need.
Representative Tagliavia.
So did I just hear you correctly? You were concerned, we have currently roughly 75% of our land is forested.
I think it's more than that, but yeah.
Okay, but you seem to express concern that possibly a 25% loss in forest was bad. So does that mean you're against any farmland that was farmland being restored to farmland, especially when we're suffering an incredible loss of farmers in this state, and we're looking to do farm to table, feed our own citizens? That I'm struggling with what I just heard. Did I hear that correctly?
I think we need to, pay attention and be aware of helping maintain agricultural lands and forest land. What I'm just suggesting is that we don't look comprehensively at the suite of strategies that are needed, both UVA and permanent conservation, and we assume, or I just am assuming, that we're going to see land pressures and development patterns that will be very different in 20 years than we're seeing right now. And there'll be much more pressure on the landscape, and there will be more lands coming out of UVA, and there will be more pressure on landowners to develop for a whole host of reasons. And we have a housing crisis that we need to address, and all of this will put more pressure on the land. And so I'm just concerned about a scenario where we don't plan for enough durability for the future.
Representative Pritchard.
Yeah, so I guess I'm trying to understand how that, putting this land, this UVA land, including it, affects conservation. The folks that are focused on that and have this mission, like the Nature Conservancy, the Vermont Land Trust, that's not going to stop them from preserving land. We've seen or heard testimony, at least this is the way I understand it, that the overall is 0.2%, and that's what it's been played along. For the Nature Conservancy, it's 0%. That's as close to permanence as you get. So I think to use the, to say that this may not, this may fall apart. I just don't believe that. Every trend shows people are going towards it and trying to preserve land. And I think the Conservancy and the Land Trust, this program helps them to take it from conserving to permanence. I think a lot of that happens within those programs. So, there's no penalty for including UVA in the goals. I just don't see how that affects this whole thing. And really, nobody's been able to show that clearly to me. I think it enhances it.
Yeah, I think a couple things. One is I don't think I'm suggesting that the whole thing was going to fall apart, but that there are going to be a lot more pressures and changes. And I think the Act 59 process, it would be of value for people to consider. What do we think is a reasonable sort of hedge for the future as far as the utility current use? What's the importance of permanent conservation? What's the right mix of strategies that we need? And we keep on focusing on the goals, but we want a conservation plan that focuses on the vision and focuses on trying to keep our natural working and natural ecological lands intact and functioning, which is a much higher percentage.
Don't you think we're doing that now?
I think we need to recognize and celebrate what we're doing now. And I don't think, though, we should just stop at that and say we're good. I think we need to have a proactive planning process like we're having now to investigate all of the strategies that we need for the future. And we need to understand what's the value of the programs now, and how do we plan for more permanent conservation, because that's what certain landowners want to do and they don't have all the options. How do we maintain enrollment in current use? How do we look at maybe opportunities for landowners to have flexibility to enroll in current use maybe for a longer period of time? All these conversations are important. And I think that if H70 was passed, my concern is then that will deflate all the good work that's happening by saying we're there. And then we'll think that we've got what we need. And then time would tell whether we were right or wrong. And I'm concerned that we should not lose the opportunity that we have right now to think about what's in Act 59 and come up with a plan. This is a planning process. And so I would say, why not plan and have opportunities and a plan for the future?
Representative Labor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure who to direct this question to. It may be Lauren, it may be our professionally trained foresters. Back when I put my land in use value, it's 175 acres initially. Primary question I was asked was, is this going to be active management or is this going to be passive management? So I selected active. I'm on my third renewal. I turned it in April 25. So that's 30 years of management. At the time I put it in, the growth rate of my forest was estimated to be about 4%. The previous owner cut at about 3.4%. If I say an active management of my oversized garden, am I still going to be sustaining 4%? Or has climate change changed that? I've seen explosive growth in my softwood trees in the last 3 years. I have no market. I don't want to cut it unless I want to ship softwood browns to Maine because of political differences between two countries. They're not going to run canopy. And my hardwood, I'm just going to let it grow. So my question to the foresters is the growth rate versus the cut rate throughout use value experience in the other part of the state different, or is it the same as mine?
Answer.
Please.
My guess is you're way over 4%. And your management that you've done actively has increased the growth rate. It's just a guess. But I suspect you hit a point where it skyrocketed.
Well, I have my own skidder and I only put it on the ground in frozen ground in the winter.
There you go.
But I've been here for 3.5 years. Damn.
I've got
almost 5 years. So when I look at that, there's been no cutting done.
You've done it.
Yeah, until 5 years ago. So when I come to the management of my land, I said, I'm getting behind on my cut prescription and I'm advancing in my age. maybe I ought to look at this in a different manner. So I interviewed foresters.
Yeah.
I picked one who agreed with my plan. Then I had to go and search for a professional logger because the part that I was falling behind on was the hardwood. And I don't own any flatwood. Okay, so I had to find somebody that would do it in the winter on hard ground, so I wouldn't see a rut in the spring. I did find him. He professionally followed the forester. I'm very pleased with the outcome, but I would like to see UVA be considered conserved.
Did your forester tell you what the growth rate was?
I never asked him.
Okay.
I just take a look at the tree, want to go up and give it a hush.
I suspect the information is there somewhere in your plan.
Let our other witness comment.
Brief comment.
And if you wouldn't mind, just for the record, saying who,
Bill Sargent.
and then Sam Lincoln.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand they're over time and everybody's busy. And Jamie, I just want to respond to the dialogue between Representative North and Jamie. As a proponent of H70, don't think that that the bill passes and we walk away. I don't think we ever stop looking at the trends and the issues in our natural lands. And to me, that's not my goal, is to count that and check a box and walk away. I just want to make that, and my comments, I hope, reflect that too, that there are a lot of pressures and a lot of issues that it's just a matter of encompassing more of what's going on. So.
I'll echo what Sam said.
Right,
One more
in the
quick
interest of
question.
time. All right, last question.
Thank you. On your number 2 of 15 slides, you showed the birds and stuff like that. My land has been in current use, I believe it's 23 years, 10 of which we signed the contract for. I've got at least 2 vernal pools or ponds. Tell me the difference in value of all the wildlife and biota in and surrounding that area, because mine is in UVA versus permanently conserved. Are they different? Is there a different value?
I think it's a wonderful question, and one that would probably, you could examine for, days through testimony here. I mean, understanding the ecological, value of different habitat types and communities.
Well, I
And
think you're misunderstanding my question. I have 2 different contracts. One says I'm in UVA, one says I'm permanently conserved.
Yep.
The land doesn't change. The biota in around that area are because of the 2 different contracts, is what's physically on the land more valuable one over the other?
I think you'd have to look at the terms of how the easement is structured. You'd have to look at your management plan, and you'd have to do some comparisons as far as the management that's happening. And there could be differences. There may not be.
How so?
You may have an easement, and you'd be better to talk to somebody from the land trust community as far as how his easements are structured. I don't know if there's certain buffers that are required in those easements.
As far as I know, I think through DEC, there are buffers anyway that doesn't need to be in a program to have a buffer. That's why I'm asking. We've got land right now that's sitting with no UVA contract or a conservation easement. It's just free for whatever the landowner wants to do, but those particular areas are still virtually untouchable because of setbacks. That's why I asked, how is the land based on a contract different, especially for 23 years? 23 years of life cycles, of breeding cycles, and all of the birds, whether they be migratory or not, the salamanders, the reptiles and amphibians. All I'm saying is there's that contribution to the conservation of all the biota that's there is the same. None of those birds know that I have a contract.
I don't think in the conversations I've been participating in Act 59, I don't think anybody's disputing that there's a utility for both of these conservation options in helping to manage for biodiversity. They're valuable options. I think it's a question of durability. And you could decide to take your land out and pay the penalty. And we don't know what will happen to that habitat. And
It'll be a clean water violation if I go too close to it. That's what'll happen. Jamie, you know that.
I'm going to end this here. Conversations are going to continue outside of the room. I appreciate all of you coming in today, sharing your perspectives and having this time to talk about this.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, adjourn.
Before we adjourn, will we have time to continue this conversation in this room
I can't answer that question right now.
next week?
Next week,
Not next, the week we get back.
we will be taking up a lot of bills that are coming to us.
Okay, so there's no guarantee that we will be able to continue this conversation.
No, there's not.
I make a motion that we take a vote on H70 right now.
Second. If that's according to quorum.
Yeah. So you have to warn votes.
No, we don't. We did this last session.
Okay. We're going to then take a break, right?
The same people showing back up afterwards. We have a quorum right now.
Somewhere.
Okay, well, then we gotta think, we can't rest. We can't.
No, then we shouldn't.
gotta go.
Before we adjourn.